Mara thought Adrian had given her the perfect life in Dubai, until she discovered she wasn't the only Filipina living his dream, and the locked basement proved some of them never made it out. Mara had always imagined her life would change the moment she left the Philippines. She grew up in a small coastal town where everyone knew each other, where the days felt slow and predictable. Opportunities were limited, and like many others her age, she dreamed of working abroad. Dubai, with its shining skyline and promise of success, seemed like the perfect place to begin again. When her plane landed, everything felt larger than life. The airport alone was bigger than anything she had ever seen. The air felt different, warmer, filled with movement and possibility. She found a job within weeks, working long hours but earning more than she ever could back home. It was tiring, but she felt proud. For the first time, she believed she was building something for herself. She met Adrian at a quiet cafe near her workplace. He stood out immediately, not just because of his expensive clothes, but because of the calm confidence he carried. He seemed to notice her before she noticed him. What began as a simple introduction quickly turned into regular meetings. Adrian had a way of making everything feel easy. He listened closely, remembered small details, and always seemed to say the right thing at the right time. Soon, their meetings became more frequent. He introduced her to a lifestyle she had only seen online. Fine dining, private drives through the city at night, and views from places she never thought she would visit. Mara felt like she was stepping into a different version of her life, one where she didn't have to struggle as much. Within a short time, Adrian suggested she move into his villa. The idea felt sudden but also exciting. The villa was located in a quiet, high-end area, surrounded by tall walls and security gates. Inside, everything was perfect. The floors shined, the furniture looked untouched, and every room was carefully arranged. It didn't feel like a place someone truly lived in. Felt more like a showroom. Adrian explained that he traveled often for business and preferred a peaceful environment when he returned. He encouraged Mara to treat the house as her own. He covered all expenses and made sure she had everything she needed. At first, it felt like a dream that had come true faster than she expected. But there was something about the silence of the villa that felt unusual. Even during the day, the house seemed too quiet. There were no signs of neighbors nearby, no casual noise from outside. The large windows showed a beautiful view, but also a sense of isolation. Mara also noticed that Adrian followed a strict routine. When he was home, he spent most of his time in his private office. Certain areas of the house were always locked, especially a door that led to the lower level. He mentioned it only once, briefly, describing it as storage and nothing important. Still, the rules were clear. That part of the house was off-limits. Mara tried not to think too much about it. She told herself that everyone had private spaces, especially someone with his kind of lifestyle. Yet, the longer she stayed, the more the small details began to stand out. Closets that seemed too empty. Rooms that looked unused but perfectly clean. A feeling that someone else had been there before her, even though no one ever mentioned it. At night, the villa felt even larger. The silence grew heavier, and every sound seemed sharper. Mara often found herself awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the stillness around her. The life she had stepped into looked perfect on the outside. But beneath that perfection, something didn't feel right. The unease that had quietly settled in Mara's mind began to grow stronger with each passing day. She tried to focus on her routine, keeping herself busy to avoid overthinking. Still, the villa held too many unanswered questions. The silence, the locked doors, and the feeling that she wasn't the first to live this life. It all started to connect in ways she couldn't ignore. One afternoon, while Adrian was away again, Mara decided to clean his office. It was one of the few rooms he allowed her to enter, though he rarely encouraged it. The space was neat, almost too neat. Papers were stacked perfectly, and nothing seemed out of place. It felt more staged than lived in, like the rest of the villa. As she organized the desk, her hand brushed against something hidden beneath a pile of folders. It was a phone, smaller than the one Adrian normally used. She paused, staring at it for a moment. There was no password when she turned it on. At first, she expected to find business contacts or unimportant messages. Instead, she found conversations, many of them. Different names appeared, but one detail stood out immediately. Every name belonged to a Filipina woman. Mara scrolled slowly, her heart beginning to race. The messages followed a pattern. They started casually, friendly, and warm. Over time, they became more personal. The tone shifted into something deeper, more emotional. The women shared their struggles, their hopes, their reasons for wanting a better life abroad. The responses were always careful, supportive, and consistent. Mara recognized that pattern because it mirrored her own experience. The same kind of attention, the same promises, the same sense of being chosen. She opened the gallery next. Photos filled the screen. Different women, smiling, posing inside the villa. Some stood near the staircase, others by the large windows or in the living room. The backgrounds were unmistakable. They had all been there. Mara felt a cold wave of realization. She wasn't the only one who had lived this life with Adrian. She was just the latest. Her hands trembled as she kept searching. She found emails and scanned documents. Flight bookings appeared one after another, each tied to the names she had seen in the messages. All of them showed arrivals in Dubai. But something was missing. There were no records of departure, no return tickets, no signs that these women had ever left. The dates stretched back months, even years. The pattern was clear, repeating again and again. A woman would arrive, stay for a period of time, and then nothing. No follow-up messages. No closure. Just silence. Mara's thoughts raced as she tried to make sense of it. Maybe they had left on their own. Maybe the records were incomplete. She searched for anything that could explain it, anything that would make the situation less disturbing. The next morning felt different. Mara woke up with a sense of urgency she could not ignore. The things she had seen on the hidden phone kept replaying in her mind. The faces, the messages, the missing return tickets. It all pointed to something serious. Staying still and pretending everything was normal no longer felt like an option. Adrian had already left before sunrise, as he often did when traveling. The villa was silent again, but this time the quiet felt heavier, almost pressing down on her. Mara stood in the hallway for a long moment, staring at the door that led to the lower level. She had walked past it many times, always reminding herself to respect the rules. Now, that rule felt like a barrier hiding the truth. She moved slowly toward it. The door looked the same as always. Plain, locked, and uninviting. She tried the handle out of habit, knowing it wouldn't open. Didn't. For a moment, doubt crept in. If she was wrong, if everything had a simple explanation, opening that door could destroy everything she had. But the thought of doing nothing felt worse. Mara stepped back and looked around the kitchen area. She remembered seeing a small cabinet where Adrian kept random household items. It wasn't something she had paid attention to before, but now every detail mattered. She opened it and began searching carefully. Inside were cleaning supplies, spare batteries, and a small metal box tucked into the corner. She opened it and found several keys, each slightly different. Her hands tightened around them as she returned to the basement door. One by one, she tried each key. The first didn't fit. The second turned halfway but stopped. The third slid in smoothly. For a second, she hesitated. Then she turned it. A soft click broke the silence. Mara slowly pushed the door open. It creaked slightly, as if it hadn't been used in a while. A faint, cold draft moved past her, carrying a stale smell that made her uneasy. She reached for the light switch just inside the doorway. The lights flickered before turning on. A narrow staircase led down into the basement. The walls were plain, and the air felt colder with each step she took. Her heartbeat grew louder in her ears as she descended, gripping the railing tightly. At the bottom, she stepped into a wide space that didn't match what she expected. This wasn't a simple storage area. The room was too organized, too structured. It looked like a place designed for a specific purpose. There were several doors along the walls. Mara approached the first one and pushed it open. Inside was a small room. A single bed stood against the wall, neatly made. A chair sat in the corner, and a metal cabinet stood closed. The room felt empty, but not unused. Everything was clean, almost prepared. She moved to the next room. It looked nearly identical. And the next. Each one the same. A pattern began to form, and it made her chest tighten. These weren't storage rooms. They were living spaces, but stripped down to the bare minimum. Temporary. Controlled. Mara stepped back into the main area, trying to steady herself. That's when she noticed the wall. It stretched across one side of the basement, covered in photos. She walked closer, her steps slow and uncertain. The photos were arranged in rows carefully placed. Each one showed a woman. Different faces, different expressions, but all shared one thing. They were Filipinas. Some of them she recognized from the phone. Others were completely unfamiliar. Mara felt her hands begin to shake. The realization hit her all at once. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't harmless. This was a system. Her eyes moved across the wall, taking in the number of faces. There were far more than she expected. The scale of it made her feel dizzy. Then she noticed something else. At the far end of the basement, slightly separated from the rest, stood a heavy metal door. It was different from the others, thicker, stronger, and secured with a separate lock. Something about it felt final. Mara stared at it, a deep sense of dread settling in her chest. Whatever answers she was looking for, she knew they were behind that door. Mara stood in front of the metal door, unable to move for several seconds. The basement felt colder now, as if the air itself had changed. Everything she had seen so far was disturbing, but this door felt like the center of it all. It was heavier, more secure, and clearly meant to keep something hidden. She tried the same keys again, one by one. None of them worked. The silence around her made every small sound feel louder. The faint hum of electricity, the soft movement of air, even her own breathing seemed amplified. She glanced back toward the staircase, thinking about leaving, pretending she had never come down here. But the images on the wall stayed in her mind. The missing women, the unfinished messages. Mara turned back to the door. If she walked away now, she would never stop wondering. And if something truly dangerous was hidden inside, ignoring it would not make her safe. She looked around the basement for anything that could help. On one of the shelves, she found a small toolbox. It looked old, but the tools inside were usable. She picked up a flat metal bar and returned to the door. Her hands shook as she wedged the tool into the edge of the lock. She pushed slowly at first, then with more force. The metal resisted, letting out a sharp creak. She paused, listening carefully, half expecting to hear footsteps from above. Nothing. She tried again, this time putting more weight into it. The lock strained, the sound echoing through the basement. After several attempts, there was a sudden snap. The lock broke. Mara stepped back, her heart pounding. For a moment, she hesitated again, staring at the door as if it might open on its own. Then she reached forward and pulled it. The door opened slowly. The room inside was completely dark. No windows, no natural light. She reached for a switch near the entrance, and after a brief flicker, the lights came on. What she saw made her freeze. This room was different from everything else. Instead of beds or simple furniture, it was filled with shelves, boxes, and stacked equipment. It looked more like an archive than a living space. Everything was organized with precision. On a large table near the center, there were piles of documents. Mara stepped closer, her movements slow and careful. She picked up the first set of papers. Passports, dozens of them. Each one belonged to a different woman. Many of the names matched the photos she had seen on the wall. Others were new, adding to the growing list of unknown faces. Next to the passports were identification cards, work permits, and handwritten notes. Some pages had dates and locations written in neat, controlled handwriting. Others had symbols she didn't understand, marked next to certain names. It felt systematic, planned. Her breathing became uneven as she continued to look through the materials. This wasn't random. This was organized, tracked, and repeated over time. Then she noticed the equipment on the shelves. Hard drives, several of them labeled and arranged carefully. Mara hesitated before picking one up. She knew what she might find, but she needed to be sure. She carried it upstairs to the office, her steps quick but cautious, constantly listening for any sign that Adrian might have returned. Once inside, she connected the drive to the computer. The screen filled with video files, each one labeled with a name. Mara clicked on the first. The footage showed the inside of the villa. A woman moved through the living room, looking around as if she was still getting used to the place. She smiled at times, appearing comfortable, unaware of anything unusual. Mara clicked another file. A different woman in the same house. Then another, and another. Each video followed a similar pattern. The women were recorded going about their days inside the villa. Some seemed relaxed, others looked uncertain. A few appeared uneasy, as if they sensed something wasn't right. Mara watched closely, trying to understand what happened next. But every video ended the same way. Abruptly. No explanation. No final moment. Just a sudden stop. She leaned back, her mind racing. The recordings confirmed what she feared. Adrian had been watching them, documenting their time in the house, tracking them, controlling them. Mara's hands trembled as she disconnected the drive. A deep, heavy realization settled over her. These women had not simply left. Something had happened to them. And whatever it was carefully hidden within that house. Mara looked toward the basement door again, her fear now fully formed. She was no longer just uncovering a secret. She was inside it. Mara barely slept that night. Every sound inside the villa felt sharper, every shadow more threatening. The evidence she had seen could not be ignored, and staying any longer felt dangerous. She knew she had to leave, but leaving without proof might mean no one would believe her. The thought of those women, their faces pinned to the wall, pushed her forward. Before sunrise, she began collecting everything she could carry. She took photos of the passports, the documents, and the wall in the basement. Her hands moved quickly, though her body felt heavy with fear. She copied files from the hard drives onto a small device she found in the office. Every second felt like a risk, as if Adrian might return at any moment. When she finally stepped outside, the early morning air felt unreal. The quiet street looked peaceful, completely disconnected from what was hidden inside the villa. She walked quickly, not daring to look back. Once she reached a main road, she called for transport and headed straight to the nearest police station. At first, explaining everything felt overwhelming. The story sounded too strange, too dark. But the evidence spoke for itself. Officers reviewed the photos, the files, and the details she provided. What started as confusion quickly turned into urgency. Within hours, a full investigation was underway. Authorities moved fast. The villa was secured, and forensic teams began searching every part of it. The basement, once hidden and silent, became the center of attention. Every room was documented. Every item was examined. The wall of photos confirmed a pattern that could not be dismissed. Adrian was stopped at the airport before he could leave the country again. His arrest marked the beginning of a much larger case. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered records that stretched across multiple countries. The same method had been used repeatedly, finding women, gaining their trust, bringing them to Dubai, and then cutting them off from the outside world. The documents in the basement helped authorities identify several victims. International agencies became involved, working to trace the missing women. Some were eventually located in different places, alive but deeply affected by what they had experienced. Others remained unaccounted for, their stories ending without answers. The videos revealed how carefully everything had been planned. Adrian had created an environment that looked safe and welcoming, while secretly monitoring every movement. The isolation of the villa, the strict control, and the hidden surveillance all pointed to a system designed to manipulate and contain. Mara's role became central to the case. Without her decision to act, the truth might have remained hidden much longer. She provided detailed accounts of her time in the villa, helping investigators understand how Adrian built trust and maintained control. Her evidence connected the pieces in a way no one else could. As the case gained attention, it spread across international media. The story shocked many people, especially those familiar with the risks of working abroad. It served as a reminder of how easily trust could be used against someone in an unfamiliar place. For Mara, returning home was not simple. The experience stayed with her, shaping how she saw the world. The dream she once chased had turned into something far more complex. She carried both relief and weight. Relief that she had escaped, and weight from knowing how many others had not. The villa in Dubai was eventually closed, its doors sealed as part of the investigation. What once looked like a place of comfort was now recognized for what it truly was. A carefully constructed trap. The silence it once held was gone, replaced by the truth that had finally come to light.